Hello, Patriots. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Lee Watts. Today we're going to be discussing some of the things that Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear covered during his press conference held on Wednesday, May the 27th. One of the things that he talked about was how he's going to be changing the Executive Branch Ethics Committee. This is the committee that will review ethics charges against those in the executive branch, specifically himself. This is a committee made of 5 people, and he said, instead of appointing all 5, I'm only going to appoint 3. And then I will allow the Attorney General and the State Auditor to each nominate 3 people, and I'll select one of the 3 that each of them put before me. And that way it'll be bipartisan. And he's really spinning this as saying, oh, look how fair it is. It's bipartisan. Oh, hold on just a second here. We need to point out something. Remember, this committee, which will review these charges, is made up of 5 people, and the governor is choosing 3 of the 5. Well, that means he has sway over every single ethics charge ruling, because he's the one who gets to decide who goes on the committee. So it gives you the impression that it's being fair, but really he gets to pick 3 of the 5 judges that rule charges that would be against himself. Something we wanted to point out and not let him get away with. Here's something else we really need to point out is this idea of mail-in voting. The Kentucky General Assembly this year passed a law requiring an ID if you're going to vote to secure our elections. Governor Beshear vetoed that, but the legislature overrode him. I find it very interesting that he kept saying, well, if you're going to do it, just don't do it this year, do it next year. Next year when there's not a presidential election. But they went ahead and overrode his veto anyway. However, this week he has now joined the ACLU in trying to get this law thrown out in the courts. So he wasn't able to actually get this done legislatively, so he's going to try to get the judicial branch to actually legislate from the bench. Now let's talk about mail-in voting, and the reason that this is really dangerous, I can hardly think of anything, would be an easier way to cheat in voting than to have this mail-in process. And as far as cheating, Governor Beshear doesn't think that anybody ever cheats in elections in Kentucky. I want you to listen to the clip. This is what Governor Beshear said himself, word for word, talking about people committing voter fraud, cheating in elections in Kentucky. And you're going to notice he says, people haven't cheated in Kentucky. There's been no cases of anybody cheating, and nobody's done that for years and years and years. Let's listen to him in his own words.
Even though there is zero history, especially recent history, of somebody trying to pretend there's someone else and submit their vote. I was Attorney General the last 4 years. We never had a valid claim of a person trying to impersonate another to vote. We haven't seen fraud in our election system outside of a number of years ago, a small scheme in a county.
That's amazing. I mean, nobody has ever cheated in Kentucky in all of the elections, and it hasn't gone on for years. This is incredibly naive, and I think we're being set up for massive voter fraud here in Kentucky. And now we're going to do a section that I'm going to be calling Something to Chew On. And I'm going to give you something to chew on right now. Governor Beshear has decided to close 4 different state parks in Kentucky. He is closing Buckhorn Lake, Cumberland Lake, Bluefield Battlefield, and Lake Barkley. The reason he is closing these is he says, I want to be able to use those facilities to be able to put patients who come down with the virus if we have a spike in the fall. Well, wait a second here. During the spring when we've had it, and into the early summer now really, we had as many as a total of 366 Kentuckians in the entire state that have been hospitalized with this virus. That is not overwhelming the hospitals. You could put all of those people in just one of the big hospitals over in Louisville or Lexington or some of the other bigger towns, and it wouldn't overwhelm them. So why is he saying we need all of these things in case we're going to be overwhelmed? Remember, Governor Beshear also commissioned to have a $7 million, what's called a field hospital constructed, and it never saw any patients. And they started taking the thing down. With $7 million, by the way, that went to the family of Allison Lundergan Grimes, the former Democratic Secretary of State. And if you take a look at the 4 different state parks that have been closed down, saying, well, hey, we might have to have these patients. I looked up the counties of all of these state parks. I want you to pay special attention. I'm going to read them off to you. These parks are in the counties of Livingston County, Lincoln, Trigg, Laurel, McCreary, Pulaski, Russell, Wayne, Boyle, and Perry. So 10 different counties. I looked up. Did you happen to know that the representatives for all 10 of these counties all happen to be Republicans? So I looked up, well, what about in the Kentucky State Senate? Every single one of these counties happens to be in a Republican state senators. He didn't close down a state park that is even in one Democratic county in the entire state. And we have a whole lot of parks. He has specifically chosen ones that only affect counties that happen to have both Republican senators and representatives. Just something for you to chew on. Now let's talk about some other things. I have noticed going online the last few days that I keep seeing commercials that are being run for Governor Beshear talking about what a great job he's doing, and you need to contact people up in Washington and tell them you need to bail us out, and Governor Beshear is doing a great job. I'm wondering, why is money being spent to just tell us what kind of a great job that he is doing? Isn't Governor Beshear given 1 free hour of TV time every single night now for months to communicate to the people of Kentucky if they should call people up in Washington? And he keeps telling us what a great job that he's doing after all. So why is money being spent for this and not being spent for something else? That's something also for us to think about, or maybe chew on just a little bit. So I want you to also think about one last thing. Is here today. Today is Thursday, May the 28th. And I went on WKYT television on their internet site earlier today, and they had a poll that you could vote on saying, how is Governor Beshear handling the COVID virus crisis? And I went, and it was about 46% saying he was doing a good job, and in the 30s saying he was doing a bad job. Well, about 30 minutes later, it was tied where it was he was doing good and he was doing bad. And then 30 seconds later, the poll was taken offline. Came back up about an hour or two after that. I checked on it and it said 64% of people said he was doing a bad job. I checked 60 seconds later, that poll was gone and it had been replaced. It replaced the word Beshear with the word Trump. So anybody who had heard about, there's this poll they're running saying, how do you think that Beshear is doing handling the COVID crisis? They changed it, and it just changed the word Beshear to the word Trump. By the way, when I went to go vote on that poll, it said I had already voted because I had voted in the Beshear one. I never voted on the Trump poll. So don't trust the mainstream media, the allies pushing this liberal agenda. I wouldn't throw the mainstream media, trust them as far as I can throw them, and I can't throw them very far. So that is some Patriot points, doing a counterbalance and trying to push back against all of this propaganda that's being pushed out by the governor and his liberal media allies every single day. So Kentucky, push back, speak out, and stand up. This is Lee Watts for Patriot Point. Stand strong, Kentucky.